All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to another lecture for Bio 1. We are going to start this module, or this module is going to go through basically a tour of the cell. We're going to start out with introduction to the cell, which is what this video is going to focus on. And then you'll have a couple of shorter videos, shorter lecture videos that are going through kind of the different components of the eukaryotic cells. And so just to start out with, um, so what do you think you have in common with a mushroom at the cellular level? And so just kind of take a minute to think about that. And so, hopefully after taking a few minutes to think about what you have in common with the mushroom, if you look at the cellular level, it's actually quite a lot. You have eukaryotic cells, which is similar to a mushroom, a nucleus, similar organelles, mitochondria, ribosomes, plasma membrane. And so there are a lot of cellular components that are really similar with other living organisms and ourselves. And with the cells themselves, they are made up of many different organelles, especially in terms of eukaryotic cells. We'll talk about eukaryotic and prokaryotes here in a little bit, but the eukaryotic cells are really the complex cells of life. And within cells, there are cytoskeleton components, which are proteins that basically serve as this scaffolding and structure of the cells themselves. And so if you remove that cytoskeleton away, you basically end up with a structure that could collapse in on itself, mainly because you don't have that infrastructure. And so the components of the cells are really important, not only in terms of structure and form, but also in terms of function and what they provide for the cell in terms of the jobs that they do on a daily basis. And so just the basic introduction with cells. So we can have organisms that are either single-celled or they can be multicellular. So single-celled organisms, examples of those are, for example, prokaryotes, so like bacteria, and then some protist individuals. And we also have multicellular organisms, which like us, and then plants and other animals, and then most fungi are multicellular as well. And there's a lot of evidence supporting the theory behind cells, and cells have been looked at ever since they were seen by Robert Hooke. And he basically looked at a slide of a cork and said that the little components look like cells, and prison cells, and so that's where the name cell came from. And so the cell theory, so all of the evidence that has come about since that time, states that all living things have to come from pre-existing cells, and that those cells basically are just descendants of each other. And so every cell in your body came from the division of another cell itself, so another previously living cell. And so that's the case with every organism on the earth. And with cells, so here we have a couple examples of what we call micrographs, where you have a light micrograph on the top. And so this is about a 300 times magnification for all of these. And this is a light micrograph of a protist called a paramecium. You would view these guys if we were in live face-to-face lectures. We would have some samples of these for you all to look at. But you can look up a video, and I think there may be a video of paramecium in the top hat section. But basically, little protists have a lot of cilia on the outside, which is what you see in that second image. So that surface electron micrograph, so that SEM image. So that really gives an idea of surface features, which you can't really see with the light micrograph. You have a TEM image on the bottom, which is that transmission electron micrograph, and you can really see the internal structures. And so the specimens have to be killed for the TEM, but with the very top one, the light micrograph, you actually can use living or dead specimens. And then whenever you look at the wide range of cells that exist, the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes and the multicellular organisms, the size of the cells will differ in terms of large, complex eukaryotic cells and smaller, somewhat more simpler prokaryotic cells. But these are still relatively small. We're talking about 100 microns to 1 micron in size, and or micrometer. Sorry. And so you pretty much need a light microscope to at least see these structures. And then you can use electron microscopes or more powerful microscopes to look at the internal structures of those cells, etc. And when we classify life, we actually classify it based on the cellular structure at the highest level. And so with all living organisms, they're placed in 3 major groups, and these 3 major groups are called domains. So you have domains, then you have kingdoms, and then you have like classes, orders, phylums, genera, species, and we'll learn about that when we talk a little bit about evolution in more detail. But so basically, you have these 3 overarching domains in which all of life are categorized into, and 2 of those domains are single-celled organisms, so bacteria and archaea. So that's our prokaryotic cells. So prokaryotic cells are your single-celled organisms, and then your organisms in the domain eukarya are your organisms that are composed of eukaryotic cells, so larger, more complex cells that have organelles, and prokaryotic cells don't have organelles, and we'll do a little comparison chart on the next or in the next slide. And so you have those three domains. Bacteria and archaea are 2 domains with single-celled organisms, and then eukarya, which is the 3rd domain that encompasses eukaryotic organisms. And so prokaryotic cells, we believe pretty good evidence that they're the first organisms or the first cells to have evolved about 3.5 billion years ago, so about 1 billion years after the Earth was formed. Again, those are in the domain bacteria and archaea, and like I mentioned, they're much smaller and simpler compared to eukaryotic cells and other cells and organisms. A lot of these cells will have cell walls, which is kind of a protective structural component for the cell. Some will have capsids or capsules that surround those prokaryotic cells and other movement structures, so like cilia or flagella. There's no membrane-bound organelles in prokaryotic cells, and that's kind of one big component. And they don't have a nucleus, which is a membrane-bound organelle, so they don't have a nucleus. Instead, the DNA is just kind of concentrated in a region called the nucleoid region. And prokaryotes have 1 single chromosome that is a circular chromosome. And then all cells will have ribosomes, because ribosomes are important for making proteins, and we'll learn all about that when we talk about the individual components, the individual organelles of eukaryotic cells. And so eukaryotic cells differ from prokaryotic cells in that they're much larger, much more complex. They have membrane-bound organelles. They first evolved, we think, approximately 2.1 billion years ago, and we find eukaryotes in the eukarya domain, and that domain is actually divided into a couple different kingdoms. So plant kingdom, animal kingdom, fungi, and the protist kingdom. And depending on the species, the cells could have a couple of different structures. So for example, plant cells have cell walls, they have chloroplasts. Animal cells don't have cell walls, they don't have chloroplasts, but then they have a lot of similar organelles between the two, except for those. And we'll talk more about that. And you'll go through that as you go through your top hat exercise. They have a plasma membrane, just like prokaryotic cells. And then they really differ in that they have these membrane-bound organelles. So they have a nucleus, they have an endoplasmic reticulum, they have a Golgi apparatus, they have vesicles, peroxisomes, etc. And again, we'll talk all about those. And then again, just like prokaryotic cells, eukaryotic cells also have ribosomes. And so, a question that could come up is that how's the nucleoid region of a prokaryotic cell differ from the nucleus of a eukaryotic cell? So again, that would be the nucleoid region has no membrane-bound structure. It is just DNA, the chromosome kind of condensed in that region, whereas the nucleus is a membrane-bound organelle that has a complex structure to it, and that's where all of the DNA is held inside the cell, so it's not kind of free-floating in the cytoplasm, which is the way we see it in prokaryotic cells. And so here's that image blown up of prokaryotic cells, where you have just a single-celled organism, some flagella, either one to a couple, to help for movement. The cell wall, which is what you see. The green line is the cell wall that helps to provide structure. You have a capsule in this species with some cilia on the outside that helps for attachment, or also called fimbriae, to help for attachment to structures. This is the nucleoid region, where you just kind of have that DNA condensed into one specific area. And then those little purple spheres are ribosomes that are what making the ribosomes are what is making the proteins. Now you compare that with a eukaryotic cell. Remember, this is much larger. You have the plasma membrane, which you also have in the prokaryotic cell, which is that yellow line there. So you have that plasma membrane, and this is what is a typical animal cell. You have the cytoplasm, which is kind of the liquid space inside of the cell, the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus. So all of these ribosomes, or I'm sorry, organelles, structures that we're going to go over. These animal cells differ slightly in that from plant cells, in that plant cells have a thick cell wall, which is what you see in this kind of beige structure that's outside of the plasma membrane. That's for kind of structure and support for the plant cells. They also have this very large central vacuole that helps to store water and helps create volume in that cell. And then they also have chloroplasts, which animal cells do not have. So you can see those three organelles are not in animal cells, like we had seen in that previous slide. And so there are 2 videos embedded into the PowerPoint slides that are uploaded onto the course website. One takes you through an animation tour of an animal cell, and then the other takes you through an animation tour of the plant cell. And so I would like for you all to go through and watch this in your own free time, just to kind of give you an idea of what these organelles look like, and just kind of a general function of overall description of what these organelles do inside the cells. And so in the next couple videos, we're going to go through and talk about each of these individual structures. We'll talk about, say, the plasma membrane, then we'll talk about the nucleus, the endomembrane system, and kind of all of the organelles that we find in cells and what those functions are. So yeah, thank you for watching this intro video to cells, and we'll see you in the next part of the cell module.